Hello, my name is Jerome Richardson. I am with the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans of America and the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Foundation, Memorial Foundation. I'm here today at Bellevue University's Military Veterans Service Center. Bellevue University is a partner of the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation, and we are working on the Share Your Story project. I have with me Mr. Jeffrey Austin. And Jeff, we'd like to kind of start the interview today. Is the 4th of May of 2023, and we'll just start by you introducing yourself and giving me a little bit of your background, if you would.
Okay. My name is Jeff Austin. I was born and raised in Wisconsin in Fond du Lac. And my family history, I've had 3 uncles that had did service, 2 Air Force, 1 Navy. I also had some uncles that were in World War II. My ex-father-in-law was in World War II. And when I joined the service in '69 to '72, I enlisted as Army, and I was trained as a combat engineer. And I was out of our training unit, there was like 20 of us that went to Europe, to Germany, and the rest all went to Vietnam. So I guess I was one of the lucky ones.
Let's back up a little bit on that, if you don't mind, Jeff. Where did you go to basic training?
Basic training was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I enlisted August 24th, 1969, and I was sent down there, did my basic training, and then I did my AIT at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and from there I had a furlough of like 14 days, I think it was, and I got sent to Fort Dix, New Jersey. And then from there I was shipped out to Europe, Germany. And I was stationed just outside of Frankfurt, in between Frankfurt and Wiesbaden. And I had an uncle that was stationed over there in Wiesbaden at the Air Force Base. So I had relatives over there at that time, which made it kind of nice. And I got to learn a little bit about the German people, and got to do some sightseeing while they were there. And then just before they left, I was put on a security unit, and we had an ammo dump, and we had a ADM unit on post, and we had a fuel depot on our post, so we had to have armed guards. And that's what I did for a good portion of my time over in Europe. So, and then I came home and I had my reserve status for 6 years. That was finished, and then I joined the Guards, because my brother was in the Guards, my sister was in the Navy, and she got out, she joined the Guards, and I was home one weekend. I didn't live at home, I was working out of town. And I was home on a weekend, and my brother said, come on down. So I went down and I joined the National Guard, which was mechanized infantry. Got to play with some of the neat stuff. So
let's, with your basic training, what was going back through basic, because it's different every branch, different every time period, because they add, subtract based on what's going on in the world. What do you remember most about basic training?
Fort Campbell was home of the 101st Airborne Division, and those people didn't know how to walk, they ran. So every place we went, we ran. And we did our basic training, and I remember the rifles that we carried were the old M14 rifles. And then we went through a little bit of, what would you call it, little bit to what to expect if we got sent to Vietnam. They had a little bit of a training thing where you'd go through like jungle warfare and stuff like that. They had a village set up with tunnels, and they had these little huts that you'd go through, and they was like booby trap stuff and get you accustomed to what to expect when you got over there. And then we did training on the M16. They weren't in. They were just starting to get into the M16, so we did some training with the M16. But and then when I went through AIT, we did our engineer school. We worked with explosives. We worked with how to put up Bailey bridges and how to put up tarmacs, the old steel tarmacs, and a lot of engineer training. And we carried M14s there too. And then got to build a couple of bridges and how to do foundation work and basically engineering stuff.
You mentioned briefly that you went to Germany after your training, but many of your colleagues went directly to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And when you got to Germany, some would say, and you even mentioned that you volunteered for Vietnam, but they don't send everybody. Was there a heightened security when you went to Germany with the weapons and the things that you had to work with due to what was going on in the world? What was that? What was the security and day-to-day like?
When I first got there, it was a typical German weather. When I got there, it was right after Christmas, so there was a lot of fog and snow, and the security at that time was you had to do your guard mount, every night. They'd pick people out of the companies, and you'd have like your guard mount, you'd have your KP and stuff like that. But after I got into security, that heightened things a little bit. They were having problems with what was it? I think it was called the Meinhof gang. They were breaking into compounds and where ammo dump got broken into. They had some riots when I was over there. They had quite a few bomb scares. So some Germans liked us and some of them didn't. It all depended on where you were stationed. We were at the base of the Maintaunus mountain range, and when you got away from the GI towns and everything, then it was different. It was kind of laid back, and people would come up and talk to you, and you got to meet more of the Germans, on how they really felt about us being over there. But like I said, there was a few that didn't like us. But you get away from the GI towns, and you get to meet the German population. We got to meet a couple of families, and we were treated just like one of their kids. The grown-ups would treat us, like as if we were part of the family. So it was pretty interesting. And like I said, I had a relative over there at that time. They had about 6 months left on their tour, and then they shipped home, but they would come down on the weekends and pick me up. And right after the day that they left, I got my POV license, and we went out and bought a car, me and another guy, and I got to see him off at the Frankfurt Air Force Base. And then being on security, we worked 4 days on. We worked 12-hour shifts, 12 on, 12 off. We did that for 4 days, and then we had a permanent pass. We could come and go as we pleased. And we had extra rations for coffee and sugar, and we had rations for gasoline and hard booze, where if you were in the company area, you couldn't have that stuff. And the only way you could have a car is if you lived off post. So being in the security, we were authorized all that stuff, so it was kind of some of the perks that we had. So we'd pack up the Volkswagen with C rations and gone for 3 days.
Now, when you say Volkswagen, what model Volkswagen?
The Bug.
The Bug.
The Bug, yeah.
A German Bug. Do you remember what year?
It was 62.
Yeah, I'll bet you there's a lot of people that would love to have the bug right now.
Yeah, ours was all blue, and we had the old canvas top, the sliding roof
Yeah.
on ours. And the guy that I bought it with, he had an accident and he smashed up the front end, so we had ours was basic blue, but it had a white hood and white fenders. So, but we put a lot of miles on that car. And just we went through 2 engines. So it was.
So with your little bit of freedom there, heightened security, but freedom to go about, what did you learn? What was most from a guy from the Midwest? What was the most surprising thing that you learned about the German culture and the German people?
The amount of English that was spoken. A lot of the older Germans, they could speak English, but they didn't like to because it wasn't that great. But the kids that were our age, I bet you 95% of them spoke good English. And we got to know one German family through the German army. We were up at, where was it? Wildflicken, I think it was. There was a German unit up there, and we got to work with the German engineers, and they worked with us. You know, they got to use our equipment, we got to use theirs, and their weaponry and everything. And we got to know one gentleman, and he asked where we were stationed, and we said Eschborn, Germany, and he said that's my hometown. So that's how we met him. Then we met his sister and his mother, and we got to know a few other German families through them. And we got to know a little bit of the culture and everything. So.
All right, so now we know the thing that you learned and were surprised about. How about the food? What was your favorite food?
It'd always be hamburgers and French fries, and there it was hamburgers and pomfrets.
And pomfrets?
Pomfrets, that's hamburger or French fries.
Pomfrets.
I did some TDY while I was over there with Lieutenant Colonel inspecting NATO ammo dumps over there, and that was TDY work. And we went into different ammo dumps and we inspected ordnance and stuff like that. And that was kind of an eye-opener. That was right after I got there. And we never stayed in a barracks. We never ate in a mess hall. We slept in German hotels and we ate in German restaurants, and that's how you got to appreciate the good food. And some of these places, you'd be driving down into a farming community. It was an old brick building, and you'd walk in, it was just wooden tables, and big heavy-set woman would come out and take our orders, and that was some of the best food that I had while I was over there. It was these tiny little, didn't even look like a restaurant.
Yeah.
Just home cooking, you got to appreciate it.
Was there anybody that you, other than your family member that was getting ready to come back, was there anybody that you met over there that you're still in contact or stayed in contact with?
No. I did, after I got home in '72, I did go out to Detroit, and I met with one of the guys that was on our security unit. And then one of the guys that was in our maintenance section when I was in the company area, I went down and seen him. I stopped in Detroit at his mom and dad's, and he lived down in Findlay, Ohio, and I drove down there and met with him. But that was the only 2 contacts I ever had. And it's, I'm not real good with names and dates and everything, so I had their addresses in my little book, and that's how I stayed in touch with them. And then one of the guys that was in our security unit, John Spencer was his name. He was African American. Him and I used to chum around a lot. He had relatives over there at that time too, so I got to meet his relatives, and I got to know a little bit of that culture. And he was from Chicago, and he was going through classes while he was in service, and he was wanted to become a police officer down in Chicago. And it was about 12 years ago when I wound up getting cancer. I tried to get in contact with him, but I had no luck. So I don't know whatever happened to John. But him and I used to chum around a lot, and I chummed around with some of his relatives that were over there. He was with one of the airborne units over there up in Wiesbaden.
So traveling, you mentioned that you went TDY. Did you ever travel outside of Germany throughout Europe?
The only place I ever went was, we were on a 3-day pass. We went down to Austria. It was a beautiful country. And you'd see the farmers out there pitching hay with pitchforks. You didn't see a whole lot of mechanized equipment, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
The way they did their farming and drive through the mountains. It was just, didn't realize we were in the mountains because we drove down to Garmisch for a 3-day stay down there, and didn't realize we were in the mountains until I got out of the car. We had to take a rest break, and I'm standing there and I'm looking at a rock wall, and I just kept looking up, and the fog kind of cleared up, and we were in the mountains. That was the first time I'd ever been in the mountains, and it was, wow. They're big.
Yeah. How about Berlin? Did you make it to Berlin?
No, I never made it to Berlin.
Wow. Is that something that you regret, just because of its notoriety, plus almost an international city with the Berlin Wall there and all of its history?
Yeah, I wish I would have known more about the German history then. What I know now is just like, man, there were so many places I could have seen that were historic. Like the Berlin Wall, to travel around Germany and see some of the spots like from World War I.
Yeah.
And that I'm not so much into the history or the people and that, but I'm more interested in the equipment that was used. But reading a lot of books now and stuff like wow, Verdun, I could have went there. I could have went to Normandy, in my travels, and I didn't. And I regret that.
It's never too late.
I wish I had the means I would, but you know how that goes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when you and I were talking earlier, there was also a little bit of kind of a chuckle when I asked you when you volunteered to serve at a time when there was a lot of turmoil in the country and the Vietnam War was still pretty strong.
Well,
what was your mom and dad's reaction?
I didn't have a dad, so I didn't have to worry about that. I was out of high school. I was working at a cheese factory from Wisconsin, and I got home late one day. I had walked home, and Ma questioned me why I was home so late, and I said, well, I joined the Army. Well, the doo-doo hit the fan, because Vietnam was going pretty good at that time, and she wasn't real happy about it, but she didn't have anything to say about it. When I turned 18, I signed the papers, and I'm my own man.
Yep.
So it was, like I said, she wasn't real happy, but.
Now, did your siblings, any of them, join the service?
Yeah, my brother, I got out in '72, and my brother Jim had just graduated, but he had joined the National Guard before he was out of high school, so he was already in the Guards. And my sister was in the Navy, and she took her training down in Florida, in California, and then she was stationed in just outside of Chicago. And she used to come home like every other weekend or once a month. And then I was home one weekend for a visit, and my brother and sister, when Jean got out of the Navy, she joined the Guards too. So I was home one weekend when they had a guard drill, and I went down and checked it out, and then I joined the Guards, which was mechanized infantry, and that was kind of like right up my alley. I got to play with some of the bigger stuff. And
Did you have to go back to training for that?
No, I took on-the-job training. I didn't have to go through basic or AIT. It was just on-the-job training. And I started out as a E4, and I was a track driver for a couple of years. And I worked with 81 millimeter mortars. I worked with 50 caliber. I worked with all the machine guns, the submachine guns, the pistols. Drove buses and trucks and APCs, and I was on the state pistol team for a year. I made the top 10% out of a combat shoot, and I was elected to go to 2 weeks of pistol training, and I made the top 10% out of that. So I was on the state pistol team for a year.
Now, I do know from a gentleman that visits the center here quite a bit, who is a competition shooter.
Mm-hmm.
For you to be top 10% in an organization as big as what the Army is, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, this was through the state of Wisconsin, the whole state of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So I felt pretty excited about it, but my ex-wife worked with a gentleman through the unemployment office, and he was a bullseye shooter. He would go to Camp Perry, and I got to know him, and he kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot of the basics before I even went to a combat shoot and got elected to go to school for 2 weeks. So I had met a few other bullseye shooters, and they kind of took me under their wing and taught me the basics and some of the skills that you had to have. And I went out and I bought the state issued me equipment, but I went out and I bought all my own equipment, and we were issued 45 automatics, and I gave mine back when I bought mine, and I rebuilt mine, and then I went out and got a Smith & Wesson Model 41, which was pretty much top of the line back then, American made, other than German. And I kept at it for a few years after I got off the team, and then as you get older, I got married and we had kids, and kind of everything went off to the side, and I had to concentrate on family. So.
And how many kids do you have now?
I have 2 boys. Both of them live up in Wisconsin, and the oldest one is 34, and the youngest one is about 18 months behind him. So raising 2 boys at that age, one didn't think of, the other one did. So. And
did any of your children follow in your footsteps?
My youngest son had joined the Guards. He was in the Guards for a couple of years, and then he got out. My oldest one wanted to, but he had a knee injury, and he had a titanium brace in his leg, so he couldn't qualify for any service. And then I do have a stepdaughter, and she's from town here, and she was a police officer for a little while. So there's always some kind of service,
yes,
within our family. So
speaking of service and family, today's a very interesting environment for our listeners that may be looking at a lot of similarities between the Vietnam War and the end of the Vietnam War and our 20-year war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the way that ended. Lot of controversy going on politically, a lot of cultural changes. Mm-hmm. And I teed that up for a reason. What would you say to a young person today, a nephew, a niece, that comes up and says, Uncle Jeff, I'm thinking about joining the military. Or you meet them over there at the laundromat and they say, oh, you were in the military, I think I might join. What would your heartfelt advice to them be?
Go for it.
Go for it. So there's no regret in your service. I noticed you were patriotic when I first met you. That's how we kind of met.
Yeah.
So that's kind of neat. Any thoughts on what's going on in the world? Advice on life? We get it, and I'm not teeing it up for one direction or another. But this is your story, and as you sit and reflect, and then look through the window of what's going on, what would you say to young people today?
If they're thinking about joining the military, I said go for it. Some of the options that you have as far as schooling and some of the benefits that you'll get out of it, to me it would be worth it. As far as the outlook, I'm 72 years old. Just live for today, and plan for tomorrow. And take advantage of what's offered to you through the military, or if you like to go into government work, or say with sheriff's department or police department or fire department, go for it.
Okay.
Things are tight, but you can
So your message is more of that: serve your community, do those things that make your community better. Some type of a service, some type of a giving back.
Yeah.
What do you take away from your military service that you have in your personal life today? Because I know you, so I am teeing some of this up. I know you have a very vast knowledge on military equipment, tanks, and artillery and things of that nature. What do you share? What's in your persona the most when somebody meets you that is derived from your military experience?
When I was growing up, I was never had a dad, so people usually took me under their wing, and I had some people that I used to babysit for. They were into hunting and fishing and stuff like that, and they kind of got me into shooting, which hunting, I've done some hunting, but I love to shoot. Just 22 high-powered rifle, pistol, you name it. And there was, I guess you'd call me like a gun nut. I've built a few rifles. I've collected quite a few rifles and pistols. And it was just, can't afford it now. When I got cancer, a lot of this stuff had to go to pay bills, but I still enjoy reading about it. I still love reading about the military equipment that's out there. I love talking to the military people around town here, some of the old veterans and some of the ones that are still serving. And there's an interest in older equipment, like say from World War II and the Korean War and the Vietnam War. I like reading about some of the personnel that were over there. Mr. Whitefeather, Carlos Hathcock. I've read some of his books. Who is he? The main sniper over in Iraq. He was served, I think it was like 4 tours over there.
Yeah.
I've read his book, Kyle.
Yeah.
I read his book. I've seen the movie. Some of the personnel, like from World War II, great respect for Old Blood and Guts. A lot of people hated them, but He wasn't afraid.
Patton.
Patton, yeah.
We have his quote on the wall when
Yeah.
you come in the door. Make sure you look at it when you go. But yeah, as you walk out the door, you'll see his quote right there.
Yeah. I had some respect for some of the German officers that stood up against Hitler and tried to do away with him. Rommel was another one. He's kind of respected that man. He knew what he was doing, you know, but Hitler just couldn't keep up with him, which, you know, it was in a good way. But some of the German veterans from World War II that did stay in the service and join the German army after the war, I've started to read a little bit about those people and how they, after the war, that they were inducted into the German Bundeswehr. And one of them was, I forget his name, but he wound up being one of the top generals in the German Air Force after the war. And to read about people like that was, they don't teach you that in history books.
Right.
You have to find it on your own, which the internet's great.
It absolutely is for those kind of things.
Yeah.
As we get winding down, is there anything, and I'm going to ask this a couple times, but is there anything that you want to share with those that are listening just about the impact of service, or anything as an overall conclusion that you want to add?
When you talk to some of the veterans, some of them don't like to talk about it, and you really have to get to know them for them to open up. When they do, you gotta listen. Because they have stories to tell, and a lot of them go unnoticed, and a lot of different family members don't realize what they went through. So
It's a very interesting situation. Again, the story is about you, but I add for the listeners that there's many cultures in Africa that when somebody joins the military, in their culture, they are viewed to be an entirely different person. An entirely, I mean, they view them to not be the same person before they joined. That their DNA literally is a different person. And when you have those experiences and you put so much out there, you don't know where it's going to lead. Because like we said at the beginning of this interview, Uncle Sam tells you where you're going to go.
yeah, you don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of reasoning that one does. You know, am I doing my part? Should I be here? Why ain't I over there? Why am I over there? You know, there's all different questions both ways, and we certainly appreciate your service. And I can't say that more strongly. At Bellevue University, we were started, not a commercial, although it's going to sound like it, in 1966 at the height of the Vietnam War, specifically because of the impact that the Vietnam War was having on our nation. So we thank you for stepping up then, and we thank you for all the things that you do in the community now that that I'm aware of. But we thank you, and we thank you for sharing your story.
All right.
Good.